Hello students, welcome to this video segment on the Renaissance in Europe. I was confused when I was a kid because Renaissance is a French word which means renewal or rebirth. And there was a renewal or rebirth of language, learning, culture, and art in Europe during this period of time. However, it started in Italy. And I was always confused that, why would they name it with a French word of something that started in Italy? Shouldn't it be an Italian word? And, just like everything, historians look back upon the history and name it. And so, because the Renaissance quickly spread to Germany, to France, and to England, they decided to pick a French word for it to, give it a little pizzazz and a little bit of fanciness. Because once the Renaissance did get to France, it really took off. But it did start in Italy, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it. Mainly, you're looking at the Papal States, which is directly in the center of this map, the purple area. This is the area controlled by the Pope. That's why it was called the Papal States. It was almost like his own little kingdom. He still owns a little kingdom today, although it is very small. It's known as Vatican City. The Renaissance traditionally began there and in Venice. If you want to look in the upper right-hand corner of Italy, where it borders the Adriatic Sea, you can see Venice. And then also Florence, which you can see almost in the center as well of the map, the yellow area, which is the sort of, I guess, Kingdom of Florence. You can see right in the center is actually a city named Florence as well. So this is where you're looking at the three areas where the Renaissance began in Europe. Remember all the ideas coming back from the Crusaders in the Middle Ages. We had different ideas coming back from these Middle Eastern cities about new ways of doing things, and also bringing back the Greek and Roman ancient texts that were preserved by the Arab librarians. This is really the biggest thing because you'll see in a lot of the architecture and a lot of the I guess educational work that came out of Europe during the Renaissance was based on ancient Greek and ancient Roman texts. Probably the most striking difference between the Renaissance and the Middle Ages is in its artwork. You clearly can tell which one is more developed, which one is more realistic and more lifelike. The Renaissance painting on the left and the painting from the Middle Ages on the right. Although you can see expression, you can see lifelike human figures in the Middle Ages portrait. You see more in the Renaissance portrait. It looks more lifelike. The perspective and the use of light is present, and you can just see that it is it's more well done in the sense that the folds in the dress and the use of light and the expression on the woman's face. When you start looking at the baby Jesus in the Middle Ages picture, you can see that he doesn't look right, like something's wrong with his body there. Hands are too long, or Mary's hands are too long, or something like that. Where you can see the proportion and perspective is perfect in the Renaissance artwork. Just the folds up near her shoulders of her dress and the creases of her dress near her lap are something that's very impressive to me. The Renaissance artists were the first to experiment with perspective and to show depth. You can see it here in the painting on the left. You've got depth behind the subject here, and you can see this as well. They were the first to take something that's two-dimensional and sort of show it in a three-dimensional way. Photographers and artists still play around with perspective today. You can see this photographer with these two boys made it look like they were jumping, between two boxes or something like that, which in reality they're laying on the ground, and she has two pallets laid out, or whoever the photographer is, between these two boys, and had positioned them in a way that looks like they're jumping. One of the kings of using perspective is this guy, and he's more of a modern artist. He's not a Renaissance artist, but when I start thinking about perspective and proportion, I think of this guy, M.C. Escher. And as you can see, he's taken two-dimensional objects and made them appear three-dimensional. This is one of his most famous works. This is another one where he plays around with your perspective a little bit, or which way are the steps going? Are they going up or down? And the more you look at it, the more your eyes start to deceive you that it's hard to tell if these guys are walking up or down steps. And if they are constantly walking up, then why is it still a continuous stairway? But if they're constantly walking down, then why aren't they descending? It's definitely an interesting way to play around with visual artwork. Here's another one. Is this water flowing upward or downward? You think it's flowing upward because of the way the waterfall looks, but then once you start looking at the columns and the trough, it does look like it could be flowing the opposite direction, other than the waterfall there. So this is another interesting work from M.C. Escher. I believe he works entirely in pencil as well. And there's a famous sidewalk chalk artist out of England that really plays around with perspective, and his name is Julian Beever. All of these things are flat, except for the little girl and the little boy in the background. Everything else is drawn flat on the ground, and as you can see, all these people standing around, because they're looking at it from a different perspective or a different viewpoint, they're not seeing what the camera is showing here. As you can see, it looks like the snowman is standing up, it looks like that little boy is rolling a snowball back there, when in reality all of these things are flat, drawn with sidewalk chalk on a sidewalk. Once you start looking at things at different angles, you can see how Julian Beever does his work. This looks like he's standing on top of the earth, like sort of, I don't know, using a broom or something like that. But when you look at it from a different perspective, from the side, you can see what really, in reality, this sidewalk art looks like. So just from this perspective, it looks like this. And from this perspective, it looks like this. This one is a lot of fun. Here's the artist himself, looking like he's getting into a pool with a drawn woman, and you can see it looks like just her head and her leg are above the water there. And when you take a look at this from a different angle, you can see what it looks like. So very amazing job with perspective. You can even see the tripod there where he has his camera set up. So look how long this leg is and foot is, and then when you go ahead and look at it from a different perspective, it does not look anywhere near the perspective from the photographer's angle. So this guy's the king of doing this kind of stuff. You can see this one what it really looks like from a different angle, which is like kind of a little bit creepy. This kid's head's so big he looks like an alien, but you look at it from this angle, it just looks like some big-headed kid crawling at you. So that's supposed to be a boy or a girl. Face looks like a boy, clothes look like a boy, but it looks like he has a little ponytail. Maybe he's like a ninja warrior or something like that. Look at the size of the ponytail in the real drawing, and then look at it here. It looks like just like a little nub. But look at it there. I mean, it's definitely impressive. So this guy's a more modern artist that uses perspective. You can see this one, makes it look like guys are crawling out of a dungeon or a jail or something like that. As long as you're looking at it at the correct angle, it appears that it has depth. Here's one which clearly the artist is not standing in piles of gold. He's actually on his knees. Another good one where this woman is probably very, very far away. Very far away. This W, I would guess that this W, if we looked at this from a different angle, which I don't have the other angle, but I'm guessing this W would be extremely big. Extremely big. Again, another one. Pretty cool. I like this one. And you can see the seams in the concrete where he's drawn this. So he's got water coming down the steps of this actual like sidewalk, and outside of probably some business somewhere, and it really looks like a pond or a lake or a river or something like that. Here's another good one. Cute. Here's a good one of the artist and himself, and you can see he drew the the artwork to look exactly the same, which this is one of my favorite ones. Here's a good one, lobster ready to eat this kid. And I actually do have the other angle from this picture. Doesn't even look like a lobster, does it? So you can see all these people, lining up to put their babies in this lobster dish. And you can see where the tripod is, where the camera angle is taken. So from the angle where if you look at like 12 o'clock, you can see the tripod there and the person taking the picture. So from this angle, and then from the back side. A lot of talent there. You can take a look at this too. You can see very talented artwork. You just look at the folds and the flag that he created. Unbelievable. Another good one. Like kids are dancing around a maypole at a school, and he's like thousands of feet above them. Although he's just standing. Like look at his shoes. He's just standing on top of a regular sidewalk. He just drew it to appear that it had depth using perspective. Again, this like mug of beer is probably humongous. It's probably very long, and that woman is sitting probably very far away from the artist. Another good one, starring Batman or Robin. Well, the guy that gets pretty much this all started, and the guy that's probably the most famous, is Leonardo da Vinci, and he's the original Renaissance man. And today, a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman is someone who has many different kinds of talents, and this guy was the original. So if you start thinking of Renaissance men, I don't know, it would be somebody that's really good at multiple things, good singing, good at acting, good at I don't know, sports. I don't know. I hate to sound like a girly man here, but I would say like Justin Timberlake could be considered a Renaissance man. We know he's a good actor. We know he's a good singer. We know he's a good public speaker. We also know that he's very athletic. So like he would be the first person that would pop to mind. It would be an example of a Renaissance man today. But this is the original Renaissance man, and his last name is not Da Vinci. He was from a region in Florence that was called Vinci, and so Da means from, so he's Leonardo from Vinci. And he's considered to be the greatest painter of all time, and only 15 of his paintings still exist. He also made conceptual diagrams of tanks, machine guns, solar power, calculator, helicopter. He is considered one of the greatest artists of all time, and this is his most famous work. This is the Mona Lisa. It is at the Louvre Museum in Paris. He actually worked on this his entire life, and he died in France. He was actually working on something for the King of France, King Francis I, and he died of old age. He was in his 70s while in France, and they found this in his possessions. And so the French government, doing what the French government did, what they always do, since it was on French soil, they decided to keep it and put it in their famous museum, the Louvre, and so that's why it's there today. It is the wife of a Florentine banker. He commissioned him, actually paid him to create it, and he just never was able to finish it. He wanted to make it perfect. This painting was actually hidden from the Germans during World War II successfully because the Germans invaded France, and actually it was stolen in 1911, and another famous artist, Pablo Picasso, was brought in for questioning, and they ended up finding out that it was stolen by an Italian museum worker who felt that it belonged in Italy, and so they ended up getting the painting back and putting it back in the Louvre. It is behind bulletproof, vacuum sealed container in the Louvre, and it is not a very big painting. Those of you that have been to the Louvre already know that you get a really far away perspective at this thing because it's enclosed in such a secure container, and also you're just not allowed to get like right up next to it, and so it's kind of hard to see. Actually, paintings or pictures that you see on the internet give you a better perspective of what it looks like. But he did invent a style of painting here, and it was called sfumato. It's spelled S-F-U-M-A-T-O, and it stands for smoky technique. And what it is, it's the blending of borders using a smoky technique. And you can see like the haziness around her head, the haziness around like her arms, where it blends like sort of into the background, and then of course the top part, the very top part of the painting itself, where the sky sort of like blends in with the background there. This is all a kind of technique invented by Leonardo da Vinci called sfumato. He also invented this idea of triangular composition, in which the main subject of the painting is within a triangular area. Another one of Da Vinci's famous works is called The Last Supper. It is currently housed in a museum in Milan, Italy. Actually, it's in a monastery, which has become a museum. It took him 2 years, and this was the first time that anybody really showed Jesus in this situation. And the story of the Last Supper is that this is right after he told his disciples that one of them was about to betray him and turn him over to the Roman authorities. And so the disciples are all shocked and appalled and trying to wonder who it is and why they would be doing it. There are many, many prints of this this painting throughout the world. A lot of old school, like Christian families, still have these. You might have one of these, a copy of this print in your house. I remember my Aunt Liz, who was a really conservative Catholic, had a huge, like one of these right over her kitchen table. Here's a drawing of Da Vinci's tank. Pretty cool idea. Helicopter. So 200-300 years before flight ever happened, he was making drawings of flying machines. Also, he invented a machine gun, which were a bunch of cannons sort of together. There used to be a show on the History Channel called Doing Da Vinci, and what they did was that they took some of these drawings and plans and tried to make them using modern equipment, modern materials. And the one that I watched, they made this machine gun, and it worked. Fired little mini cannonballs. Another famous Renaissance artist is this guy's name's Michelangelo Buonarroti, but he is known just as Michelangelo. He has some very famous work that he's done. One is inside the Sistine Chapel, which is in Italy. This is the altar wall, which is behind the main altar. This is known as the Last Judgment. It took him 6 years to paint this, and it involves Jesus coming back to earth and judging people whether they were going to go to heaven or the bad place. And so you can see people rising to the top. Those are the good people going to heaven, and you also can see people descending down. Those are the people going to the bad place. It took him 6 years to paint this. This is in the Sistine Chapel in Rome, Italy. But he's more well known for the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It took him 4 years to paint this. He painted it on his back because it is on the ceiling. So he made scaffolding, and the scaffolding rose all the way up to a couple feet away from the ceiling, and he laid on his back. He worked for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for 4 years, only taking Sundays off. He hadn't worked on a fresco before, and that's what this is. It's sort of like watercolors on wet plaster. And so this was the first that he had played around with fresco. But as you can see, it's very, very beautifully done. There are 300 figures on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and they play out 9 episodes from the book of Genesis. And those of you that are Bible experts know that Genesis is the beginning of human life on the planet. There's 3 sections of the ceiling. One is God creating the earth. The second is God creating humans. And then the third one is the human fall from grace because of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The most famous panel, here's another nice further away view of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. The most famous panel is the one that's in the dead center. It's called Creation of Man. And what it is it's God giving life to Adam, with a strategically placed text box there because many of the Renaissance artwork artists decided to depict their subjects naked. Even though it is art and it's not something that we should obviously be ashamed of, I just figured that some of the boys in some of my classes just wouldn't be able to handle it, and so I decided to put text boxes over Adam to make him a little more modest. But one of the things I do want to point out is that this is the hand of God touching Adam's hand, giving him life. But please just think about it. Michelangelo's lying on his back painting, paint dripping in his eyes, probably his whole body is sore from lying on his back on the scaffolding during all this time, and he's creating, look at the musculature of Adam, his arms, his shoulder, the expression on his face, his core. You can see that Michelangelo took a lot of time in creating this, for sure. Also, you can see, the hand of God coming to touch Adam and the expression on God's face there. I've seen this painting on T-shirts before, except God is saying to Adam, "Pull my finger." Ha 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 ha. This is another one of Michelangelo's famous works. Not only was he a very famous painter, he also was a very famous sculptor, and this is his famous sculpture that is in France. It is known as Michelangelo's David, and it's depicting the legendary King David. And this is carved entirely out of marble. One of the interesting things here, again, other than the strategically placed text box, you can also see the musculature in his bicep and his like core area, the expression on his face. Guys, this is carved out of stone, and you also can see behind David's right leg, that wood, that little like stump there, is not there for looks. It's there for support because the statue is so heavy that it would, it would break off or it wouldn't be supported very well. And so you can see, this guy, it was very, very talented. Another one of his famous sculptures is this. It's called the Pieta. You've probably seen this before. It shows Mary holding Jesus right after Jesus' crucifixion. You can see the nail holes in Jesus' hands, and you can see the look of sadness on her face. Guys, carved entirely out of marble. This is the only piece that Michelangelo ever signed. So his signature is carved in the back of this piece of artwork. One of the interesting things I like about this is the folds in Mary's dress. The person, Michelangelo took the time to carve those folds into the stone. Just amazing, amazing work here. One of the things, and I had an art history appreciation class in college, and one of the things that we talked about with this sculpture, and it's something that Michelangelo knew. There's a large proportion mistake here, a proportion issue. If you think about it, a grown man is never going to be able to sit across a woman's lap the way that Jesus is here. Like Jesus would, have to be only like a 9 or a 10-year-old kid to lie across a woman's lap like that. Think about, me. If I were sitting across a woman's lap, I would not look like this. I would never even be able to be held in a woman's lap. I'd be overshadowing the woman. Mary is a giant compared to Jesus here if she would be able to hold him across her lap. As a matter of fact, many art historians estimate Mary's height, if she would have stood up, to be somewhere around 7 or 8 feet tall. Michelangelo did know about the proportion issue, although he wanted to show the solemnity and the sadness of this event. And so the Pieta does have a proportion issue, but Michelangelo knew fully well about it, and that's one of the interesting stories about the Pieta. Another interesting story is that a guy who was mentally ill in 1972 attacked the Pieta with a hammer, screaming, "I am Jesus, I am Jesus," and he knocked pieces of Mary's nose off, and it had to be restored. Some of the people that were nearby, the onlookers, took pieces of the marble and ran because they realized that this was like, a large piece of history, and they wanted to make sure that they were part of it. The Renaissance spread to Germany as well, and this guy's name is Johann Gutenberg, just a fun name to say, Johann, and what he invented changed the world. He invented a printing press, and until this time, books had to be copied by hand. But once he invented this, he could take movable type. He could, like little metal pieces with letters on them, he could place them, let me see, there it is. He would place them in these little brackets, then take these little brackets and put them in a frame, and then he'd be able to ink those words, right, those letters, the words that he put together, and then press paper down, and he would be able to mass produce pages of books. Because before that, books had to be hand copied by monks, and they were very expensive and very time consuming. But now he's going to be able to crank out, very quickly, once the type is set, he could crank out 1,000 page one of a book, and then while he's printing that, he could have his workers being put together page 2, print together 1,000 page 2s, print 1,000 page 3s, and then what he'd do is he'd bind them all together into books. And this revolutionized the way that books were made in Europe, and because now books are going to be more readily available, that makes the supply go up, that makes the demand grow as well, and also this is the biggest thing, it makes the price go down, because only the very, very rich could afford books until the printing press was invented. And once it's invented now, a lot of people in Europe can afford books. So what do you think Gutenberg did first? You guessed it, the Holy Bible. He made 21 complete copies of the Gutenberg Bible. The last time one has surfaced for sale was in 1978, and it sold for $22 million. Historians and I guess collectors estimate that there's 7 in England, 5 in the United States, 3 in Germany, and 2 in somewhere in France. And so they estimate today that the Gutenberg Bible is somewhere around $35 million if you have an original copy of a Gutenberg. So here's what I need you to do. if you ever find a Gutenberg Bible, say you're cleaning out your attic, say you find it, you're in like some like old grandparent or old like great uncle's house and you're helping your parents clean it out, and you open up a box and you find a Gutenberg Bible. This is the most important part of this video. This is what you need to do. You need to take it, don't tell anybody, put it in a bag, and bring it to school. Give it to me. This is what you need to do. This is very important. All right, I don't want to say anything else. We'll take it from there. All right, I'll help you. I promise. Just kidding. Yeah, it's worth $35 million. You would not want to bring it in and give it to me because you'd never see me again. All right, that's it. Thanks so much. Take care.